Okay, with that in mind, I'd like to call the City Council Finance Committee of September 21st to order. And I see that, Noah, you have the agenda up on the screen. So without further ado, why don't we just go ahead and jump right into it?
Great. First thing we'll start with is the sales tax report. So far 2021 has been a phenomenal year, and it just continues in August as our sales tax revenue received was $621,000, which is about $75,000 more than we received in August of 2020. Year to date, our actuals are about 23.24% higher than prior years for the same time period, and we're about 32% of our budget for 2021. So again, excellent sales tax revenues figures coming in, still with 4 months to go in the remainder of the year.
Yeah, no, this is another great report.
The real estate excise tax also continues to be strong. Again, we talked about this last month. There were some large sales that caused that large increase to $500,000 roughly. But August, again, continues to be strong with $141,000, which is about $55,000 more than we recorded in 2020. So our actuals are about 157% higher than 2020 for the same period of time. And again, most importantly is we've already achieved our biennial budget, and now we've exceeded it. We have 110% revenue received of our biennial budget with a year and 4 months to go.
It's incredible. Too bad Nick isn't on the line here. We could thank him for all of the work that he and his folks are doing. Okay, any questions on the sales tax?
None here.
Yeah, I don't have much I can add.
Okay.
Let's go on to fund balances then.
So again, last week I distributed the monthly budget report. I'm just going to pause real quick here on the REIT impact fee fund. We've been providing this regularly and tracking it. So the most important part of this table, at least for me, is that when we look at our 21-22 ending balances, taking into consideration our revenues, our budgeted and additional expenditures, which we've obligated but have not yet budgeted, we are positive on our REIT funds. And our transportation impact fee, we are only roughly $12,000 away from having a zero balance there. So we're almost at the goal of meeting our budgeted and obligated expenses for the biennium. So that is fantastic. That was the one area that we wanted to monitor as we work through this year. So we're closing in on that number.
And that's the biennial number.
Correct. Yep.
And we're not finished with the first year of the biennial.
That's correct. And then we'll take this information as we work through the mid-year review and look at projects and project cost adjustments. But so far, all really great news for the city.
Yep.
Taking a look at the cash and investment fund balances, again, all our fund balances are incredibly strong. Our current expense fund, 001, we have roughly $10.5 million in there. Again, $1.4 million of that is the ARPA money. So that's restricted revenue in the fund, which still leaves us with roughly $8.5 million of general fund dollars in there. All real healthy funds. I have no concerns at this point with any of our funds, which is great timing as we again work towards our mid-year review and looking at additional expenditure authority. Are there any questions on this report? I did want to point out one activity this month that we did. We budgeted a transfer amount of $677,000 to come from our Street Capital Projects Fund 304. And that money is actually a return to the REIT fund. So you'll see a big figure here. And then the REIT has a total activity of 553,000, but that's a net activity. What we did is in the prior budget, we had budgeted $667,000 of REIT revenue to go towards Tremont. We moved those funds into the capital construction fund, but once we closed the Tremont project, those funds were unexpended. So as such, I'm returning it to the REIT 2 fund to be reappropriated for future capital projects. So that's a big transfer that showed up in these financials this report. And I want to complete that now, since it doesn't appear that there's going to be any significant expenses, and Tremont is, from our purposes, all intensively closed, although WASDOT has not closed off on it yet. So if in the future they come back, we might have to take action to do something. But at this point, I'm operating as if it's closed, and we feel good about it.
Remember, we got the pathway project that we're charging ahead on, and we'll need a few $1 million for that. So there's a down payment.
Yeah, no, it's great that we can finish that project and be able to put back monies that we didn't need. So, okay. Any questions?
So with that, I did invite Steve Havert to the meeting, and allow him and the mayor to tag team the audio visual system update. So Steve, if you want, I can pull up, and
You got that summary
on a
document
summary.
that's pretty good. So yeah, if you remember correctly, we had our couple of meetings when we tried to meet in person, and we've got really on the video side 3 eras of equipment in that room. The original stuff, which is some of our audio stuff and a little bit of our video equipment, some upgrades we did about 10 years ago, and then the stuff we've recently got, and they all work independently just fine. But if we want to do this hybrid meeting, which was kind of the direction I believe we were given, we brought a consultant in to evaluate the equipment we have and give us, a path to solve our audio and video challenges if we truly want to do that hybrid meeting where people are participating in person and via Zoom or some other platform. So with that, Steve, you want to talk about the proposal? You muted, Steve.
There. Okay. Yeah, I get torn between Teams and Zoom and GoToMeeting, and the Zoom button is always different places. So yeah, so a couple of the issues in the challenges, I guess I should say, have to do with in the configuration of the city council meeting. The audio works pretty well. All those fixed, gooseneck microphones that are in place that have been there for quite a while. Those work fine. So one of the challenges was in a work study configuration, there really wasn't a good way to capture that sound. I know you were using those wireless mics for some period of time, which had problems in terms of you had to speak right into it to really get sound. And then if multiple people were talking, it really didn't pick that up very well. So the proposal here is to install a ceiling mounted microphone. It's actually an array of microphones that would hang over where this work study tables are set and pick up that that sound of the conversations going on. And then that would be, brought into the system, the audio system. And then, so that would, if you had a Zoom meeting, it would feed into the Zoom meeting. If there were in-person folks, it would also route. So we want another part of this proposal, just to segue real quick, is to separate the speakers into zones. Right now, all the speakers are in one zone. So if you turn down the volume, they all go lower. If you turn it up, they all go louder. So what they're proposing is separate the speakers into zones so that in the case of a work study session, that the speakers that would be over where the audience is would send the sound out from the conversation at the table, but the speakers above this, the work study group would not, because then that would cause the feedback into the microphone, and that's where you would get distortion. So that was, the idea there, that would solve that problem. Also, they're talking about replacing the existing speakers in the chambers just to get better quality speakers. Those are old speakers, and it would allow them to do this zone control of the speakers. So that's kind of a retrofit. They don't have to go into necessarily the ceiling or anything. They think they can just pull the speakers out, and they'll be actually mounted, so they will be able to be tilted in different directions if they need to be. So they won't be that flush mount that we have now, but it'll give a much better quality of sound. And then basically just solve the issues with the new equipment is called a digital signal processor. It's not like the old analog systems that's done with just wires and stuff. This actually needs programming. Some programming was done, but now more needs to be done, and to incorporate the new microphones and speakers. So that's part of this, is to get that programming of the DSP, the digital sound processor, tuned in so that it handles all these different scenarios we're going to throw at it. The new control touch panel with wireless iPad interface. So if whoever's running the meeting, whether that be Brandy or Janine or somebody, would have a control panel that would allow them easily to mute, certain microphones, adjust volumes, do all that kind of work with a real easy to use, and they could do it on a wireless iPad, so they could be in the meeting and do it, but just offering more flexibility. Right now, the controls are a little clunky. I think they're better than what they used to be, but it could still be better. So that's pretty much for the audio. And then on the video side, it's really the video, what we have now works fine. It just needs to be incorporated into the whole Zoom concept, because right now we have a Zoom cart, which is kind of standalone, but we'd really like to be able to have all those cameras come into play, even in a Zoom meeting, and be able to switch scenes and have maybe one, the agenda on one screen, and maybe the, another presentation on a different screen. So this would allow the flexibility to have multiple different images on different screens, rather than right now every screen's got the same image. They're just a mirror of each other. And then again, all this would be able to feed into Zoom. And so you'd have basically a replication in Zoom of what you would have if you were in person.
Steve, quick question on the audio side. I think it goes without saying, but just to verify it, the microphones that we have up at the dais would be tied into the system as well when we are all back in person. And yeah, the other question is, when we bring out the podium for public,
right,
that I'm assuming, is that going to be done with ceiling mics, or will that be connected up so that the mic on it will?
That would, right, and that would continue. So the wireless mics that we have, and that's one, that podium mic is one of those wireless mics, would still be used. They'll still be used. We could utilize them if people were in the audience and they wanted to ask questions, and you wanted to have a session where somebody, like I can think of a talk show, or the host walks up and hands the person the microphone, that would still be feasible. But that microphone at the podium would be a wireless mic, just like it is now. So that would not change.
Yeah. If I may, any of our microphones that are at your chin work just fine, whether it's at the dais, the staff, or the public. It's our work study that creates the challenge, and it's twofold. One, it's feedback from the speakers, and the new speakers are going to have, I guess speakers have, I learned that have different shaped cones, and then the modern speakers are we're going to be very directional in the sound, and split the room into two halves, so that Miss Harmon, when she's sitting back there, can hear us, because when we're in the work study formation, we don't want that microphone, excuse me, the speakers where we're sitting providing feedback. They'll provide feedback. So it's separating into 2 zones, modernizing our speakers and getting a microphone array that picks up the group setting. We're in good shape with anything that's sitting at your chin.
The other question I have is in regards to the video system. You'd indicated we're going to tie in all the cameras into the ability to use it on the Zoom platform. So I'm assuming that when there is somebody at the podium to testify for whatever, that individual that camera could be turned on and projected onto the Zoom system.
Correct.
Good. Okay, Becky, you have a question?
I do. I have 2. And my first one is regarding the audience. And will we still have the headphone availability for those citizens that would like to use that?
Is that like the hearing impaired system?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was incorporated. The existing system was incorporated into the new equipment. So yes.
Okay, and when we're talking about Zoom, I'm assuming that I could participate, anyone could participate remotely to a council meeting or a committee meeting without having to be present. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the intent of this upgrade. Another feature that just if John asked about too, those TVs in particular, Councilmember Diener and Councilmember Chang, the best display in the house is over there behind their back. We'll have the ability, and the easiest solution is if you turn your microphone and your sound off, you'll be able to log into the Zoom presentation. If we're sitting at the dais, we all have devices. You can watch the presentation or, on Noah's fabulous PowerPoint from your own screen. You're not going to have to, if the screen's easier for you to look at, great. But if it's not, you can look at it at your own device. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I think this is fantastic and something that we definitely need to get upgraded. I mean, our sound system and video system has been less than desirable for, I know, all the years I've been around, and this would be not only a win for staff and the council, but also for the public. My only question is I understand how this is going to work, but to Beck's point, let's say we have a council member that's remote and we break into executive session. Is that back room going to have technology to enable that piece?
Yep, it's already there.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have, just like we're doing, a Zoom link for an executive session. We'll all be in the back room, and that person will come in through that private link that
And
we
that
provide.
back room has a camera?
Yep, we've done them in the mayor's conference room down here, and a video conference set up in the council conference room.
That's great.
So Steve, they gave us a proposal for a 5-year service contract because we don't have anybody in-house that can work on this stuff. And does this price include that, or is it on? It was like $5,000.
Right. I believe that is in addition to that. I don't think that is what would be annual, support fee. I don't think that's included. No.
So I would recommend we get the support and the service that goes with this, because we don't want to be fussing with this. We want to pick up the phone and come fix this thing. It seemed pretty reasonable for 5 years. I think it was 5 years, wasn't it, Steve?
I believe so. I was focused on I'll have to double check.
It was either 3 or 5 years.
360-degree service plan, 3-year essential plan is 5,436. So that's 3 years.
For 3 years.
Yeah. 1 year is 1,800. It's obviously a discount, multi-year discount, but I would say that's probably pretty reasonable, since again, we don't, like you said, we don't have anybody in house. I mean, Matt and I are IT guys, and we have done the best we can as far as doing, supporting this audiovisual implementation, but we really don't understand how a lot of this works. It's a whole different world, audio, especially when talk about programming a digital signal processor. It's not something that we have the expertise to do. So I think it would make sense that we can pick up the phone and call these guys and say, hey, and a key thing is they're local. I mean, they're on the other side of the sound. I think they're in Renton.
Yeah.
So, they're not far away. I think that's one of the things our previous vendor, not the one we used just to implement some of this stuff, but the one before, they were up in Edmonds or if they didn't want to come down here, basically, so it was like, oh, try this, try that. So I think this would be a much better vendor for us, because I think they would be willing to send somebody on site and they would have set up the system. They'd know it inside and out. So I think it would avoid a whole lot of headaches if we could contract with them for support.
Well, I would think that if we're going to invest this kind of money into a system, that we'd want to be able to take advantage of all its features. So
right.
I agree that we should go ahead and include that into the package.
Okay.
And maybe at the end of 3 years, we'll, it's
Yep.
bulletproof and we don't need, where it works seamlessly and we don't need that. But, well, but I think for the short, in the beginning, I think it's going to be money well spent.
Mhm.
Well, and every system has bugs. So Beck, Sean, do you have any?
I
concern?
agree. No, I like it.
Yeah, I would definitely make sure we had the maintenance as support.
Good. Good. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks
So
for the
then,
legwork
Steve,
on
I
that.
guess we will bring that forward because we would like to get them underway. I want to share this with the finance committee. It's kind of interesting. I'm on a board of many other cities, and many of the cities are doing the same thing we're doing, trying to develop this hybrid
Yep.
city hall model. And a lot of them don't have the equipment. Equipment's on back order at least 6 to 9 months. And this company in particular is in high demand because I've heard other people trying to reach out to this company to get on board with them. So thank you, Steve, for getting us in the queue sooner after we
Yeah.
kind of got our struggles and reached out to them, even though it's been a lengthy process. So we kind of want to get moving because we know it's going to be a lengthy process no matter what. So the sooner we can get the contract signed, get on board, we'll actually get them in here maybe by December, January, just due to timing.
Well, and I would add to that I think you're absolutely correct. And it's not just here in Washington, it's nationwide. That sooner we can get the equipment on order, I think the sooner we're going to be able to see it. So.
Yep.
Great. Okay.
Good.
I think we got direction there.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I guess you're subbing.
Well, if Noah could bring up that agreement. So for this, when we started the there we go. When we started the City Hall project pre-COVID, we were going to do the inside and the outside, and then COVID happened and we slammed the brakes on expenditures, and we said we're just going to do the shell of the building. Well, we're still under COVID problem. We still have COVID challenges, but revenue is very good. And we have Rice Fergus Miller under contract. So I think it makes sense to have them do some additional design work. And then we would put this in the package when we do the remodel, is add alternates. And if we get good bids, then we would add these elements onto the construction project. And if we don't get good bids, we'll have the designs and we can do them later. Now, the first two items I really feel are needs, and the second two are wants. We talked about doing we more than talked about, we directed Rice Fergus to design a bigger solar array for City Hall. And as a result, now this thing needs structural engineering. We've got bigger foot, where the feet go into the ground deeper. We've got utilities and things in the ground. So they need to do a body of work to design this bigger solar array and not break the infrastructure and locate the columns and supports in a manner that doesn't interfere with the infrastructures in the ground in the parking lot out there. So that's really a must if we want to have that bigger a solar array. The second item is, I think we're headed down the path of cameras in our, body cameras in our police department. And to do that, we're going to need at least another body or two. And this is just preparing for that. We have a pony wall, if you've ever been in our police department, that bisects the middle of the room, and it's not in a convenient place, and it could be shifted back about 5 or 6 feet. And so with that, and then the chief would like to put that behind that pony wall is the area where the police officers gather and their workstations, and they can be, when they're in the building, they can be a little loud and disruptive to the other folks that are working in there. So he would like to move the pony wall back, put a glass partition across the top so you can see into what's going in there, but the sound doesn't travel out. And then that will allow us to put a row of cubicles along the outside of that pony wall to get us probably 3, maybe 4 additional workstations. So if we're gonna add bodies to our police department down the road, we've got to be able to house them, and this is a way for us to do that. The next item, tasks 3 and 4, we don't have, our building was designed 20 years ago, and on our court and our finance area don't have American Disabilities Act compliant customer service counters. And so these are more, this would be nice to have, if money gets tight in the project. I think these are things that on the, as we take it out to bid, we could pull out, but it sure would be nice to have these designed and be able to add this in if the bids come in right. So I'm asking for, to design those improvements and put them out to bid with the package if we could. So Noah scrolls down. All total, the 4 tasks are slightly more than $39,000. The solar array 17.5, the police design for the police renovations is 4,500, and then you can see 7,500 and 9,500 for the customer service counter areas. It's basically redesigning the whole customer service area. In particular, at finance, I think we'd like to have a singular customer contact point. And then what we observed up at the county is they've got your ADA seat there is also got we would put a workstation there for self-service for not just somebody with the disability, but we're going to more and more online forms and processes. And so if somebody comes in and says, I want to get a parking permit, versus handing them a piece of paper, we point them to the workstation there and they type all their information in and boom. We'd hope they do it at home, but so many people do still walk in here to City Hall. So that's my pitch, and I'm happy to answer questions. John?
Mayor, is there any more talks about possibly relocating our courts? And if so, how would that impact these designs?
If we did something with our court, we wouldn't do this. It's just efficiency in, we have an architect under contract, and if a year or two from now we decided we needed to move forward with this, we would have to go through a procurement process to select a new architect. It's just staff time. There's money involved in that too.
Okay.
To me, if 7,500 is a lot of money, but in relative terms, if we were not to do it now and do it later and go through an RFP process,
right,
we'd be spending a lot more than $7,500 just in staff time alone. So,
yep.
RFM is already in our building and got, somebody new would have to get up to speed on all the things that are going on in the building. So there's quite a bit of efficiency in doing it this way.
No,
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to go ahead and include these interior things.
Yeah, and they're just going to be designs at this point.
Right, just the design point. The questions that you mentioned, and maybe you can refresh my memory. We've determined that we have a water intrusion problem with the lower entrance to the city hall. In our work that we're planning for improvements to the outside, I'm assuming we're going to address that issue.
Yeah. One of the solutions for that lower doorway is to put some sort of weather protection canopy over the door and just get the water away from the door there. And then secondly, the pad right there, there's some things we can do with seal it up, but it's just flat. And so there's just, the water doesn't go anywhere. So when it rains really hard, the water just kind of stands there and then it gets underneath the doorway and it travels along the floor. So
Right. No, I understand the issues. I just wanted to make sure that they're going to be addressed with whatever
Yes.
improvements to the outside.
they are. Yeah, that's all part of the big remodel project, is making sure we're watertight from roof, windows, and siding.
Including, wasn't there an issue with behind the planter box?
Yeah, it wasn't as big when we opened up the walls down there. If you've been down there, there's green board on the walls, and that's the way we've left it. It is there, and we removed it. It shouldn't have had drywall, but it isn't causing the problem. Really the problem is the water coming in at the entryway, and then the sheetrock wicking that water up the wall.
Yeah. Good.
You're not
Sounds
supposed to
great.
get sheetrock wet, I understand.
Not if you want it to stay flat.
Not grow mold.
Well, that too. All right. Any other questions, comments? If not, I guess, Noah, we're back to you and the budget mid-biennial schedule.
And you guys don't need me anymore, is that correct?
No, just unless you
No.
want to suffer with the rest of us.
Thank you.
I think I won't. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Steve. So we've officially kicked off our mid-biennial review cycle. And so I just want to go over the schedule with the finance committee and the mayor, make sure it works for you guys. This is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm planning. And of course, we're going to be flexible and make it all work in the end. So for the month of September, we've kicked out the budget status report. Similarly, how I provide a monthly budget report to the finance committee, I provide a monthly budget report to each director. But at this budget report, it's a year-to-date actual, so the directors compare their budgets and look how their budget is going so far to their actuals. Are they up? Are they down? And then we have some instructions on how I'd like them to respond. And primarily, we put the focus on that this isn't a new budget. It's really identifying where the things that you budgeted that came in higher than you originally thought. Are there any new and emergency issues that we need to capture? And then is there anything kind of the wants that you'd like to want to see come up? So we kind of ask for these three elements and ask them to respond. I give them till Friday this week to respond. So far, I've got a few departments, but not all. After I receive all the responses back, I'm going to compile the data, compile the requests, the dollars, cents, and then I'll sit down with the mayor and we'll review it, and we'll look at all the requests and the asks by department, by fund, and by impact. After that, the mayor and I will work to bring something back to the finance committee at an October 7th special meeting. I hope you guys have that on your calendar. I believe the mayor sent out an email a few weeks back on that, and we need to have that scheduled by Janine, so we all have that on our Zoom calendars.
3 p.m., correct?
Yes. Yep. So I hope that still works for everybody. So the intent would be bring back kind of the requests and the mayor's recommendations, kind of where we're at. We'll talk about it, see if the finance committee has anything to add, anything that they'd like to see, and then after that, we'll work to finesse the numbers, make the requests balance, and then we'll bring the full request to the full council on the 19th, the work study session. We'll review all the requests, the modifications, both by the mayor, finance committee, and kind of where we're at. Take further comment from council. And then at the next meeting, we're going to do a couple things. First, we will do our regular annual public hearing on revenue sources, which lead to our property tax hearing and our property tax levy. So I have them all three scheduled that night, like we have in the past. And then we will also have the public hearing on the modifications to the biennial budget and adopt the modifications at that time. So it's really, this whole schedule is really focused on completing our property tax levy adoption, as well as our biennial budget modifications all in October. And so then we're free for November and December.
No, just confirming, I don't have October 7th on my calendar. What time?
I believe 3 o'clock is what we had targeted.
Yep.
And if that won't work, now is a great time to let us know, and we can try to reschedule.
No, it'll work. I just want to get it plugged in here. So I'm assuming that at this point is virtual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Great.
So overall, I don't think there will be any big surprises. I know the mayor has a list. So far, he has the biggest list of asks. But most of his asks, to be fair to him, are actions. They're more cleanup items, I would say, that he's been tracking, actions that the council's taken already on approving contracts. So a lot of them are cleanup items. And then some of them are kind of like this audio that you've heard today. And so a lot of
Yeah.
cleanup stuff, but it looks big.
Well, and it's people, tracking the people, because we promised we would obligate revenue for a period of time for some of these people that we hired.
Well, I was only going to mention to Noah that you may not be able to tell the mayor no, but we can. So
He tells me no all the time. They all do. We
but
can't
you-
do anymore.
That is true. So we got a busy couple weeks coming up. I hope it's not too aggressive. I think we can accomplish it, although I am down my senior budgeting staff member as she moved to the Public Works Department. So I'm hoping the departments are very focused in their requests and we can have a good, productive conversation.
does that mean that the Public Works Department is going to be the last one to get incorporated into the revision?
That's probably true. They are usually the biggest requester anyways. They do have quite a bit. I mean, we've been talking about all the different projects and loans that they've been applying for and their goals for 22. So they have been doing a lot, and this is a good chance to capture that, take a look at the budget and look at the impacts.
Well, it certainly looks doable. So you're going to be the busy one.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, if things, don't pan out, I always build it so we do have time. I mean, ideally, I wouldn't want to slide into November if we can pull this off, but if it does, then we'll complete it by the end of November. And if that doesn't work, well, then we have to complete it by that first meeting in December, because that's it.
Right.
That's all I got.
would say that's the hard line there. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Great.
I got a couple little things for the good of the order, if you wouldn't mind. I've been working hard on this community center DNR lease, and then the commerce funding, accessing the commerce funding. And John and I talked about the DNR lease a little bit today. The bank currently has a bond. DNR's practice and policy is that when you have a building on a piece of property that you lease from them, which the bank building is, that you provide a bond for 1 year of your lease payments. And the bank currently has that, and DNR is asking that of us. And I'm still pushing back. I think it's a little silly. We have a number of DNR leases, and good faith and credit of the city ought to be enough for an $18,000 a year lease. I reached out to our lobbyist at John's direction and talked to him about it, and whether I should be talking to Hillary Franz at the director at DNR. And he advised me not to, because he said you might win the battle, but you'll lose the war, because in 3 or 4 years you're going to be asking DNR to renegotiate a lease and provide this land to you for free. And we want that process to go very smoothly and easily, and not create hard feelings now. Noah and I've talked a little bit. So there's a provision in the RCW that allows them, they could choose to do it a different way, which would be 1 month's lease payment that they hold in cash. Whether they're willing to accept that alternative or not, it's at their discretion. So I'm working through a process, but we end up, and it's really Noah's call of whether we want to, a bond is an insurance policy and it's an expense. Do we want to buy that, or do we want to pledge a CD for $18,000 if we have to do that? And it's in place well until we tear the building down. So more to come. I'm just briefing you guys on what my afternoon was like.
Seems like an amount that's just not germane. So whichever is easiest for Noah and his team to meet their needs. And I agree, I wouldn't push back too hard. It's a small number if we're going to need a bigger ask down the road.
Yeah, it's just kind of insulting, really. That
I don't know that I would suggest it as a pushback. I would simply raise the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it really necessary for a government?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm doing, John. And Charlie's on her third time pushing back. So we're once I provided her to the RCW and what some alternatives are for her to try, but they're in control. We can't close on the property until
it's not a lot of money that we need to hold things up, but
yeah,
it's still the point of it.
And so Nick and I had some interaction with Commerce today about getting our documents in order for accessing that $1.2 million, because we're getting close on the DNR piece of it. And they've advised us that a reimbursement is much easier and from a paperwork standpoint than a funding and escrow transaction. So Noah, we're going to engage Noah in that process to make sure that we get all of our ducks in order and evaluate the two processes. So we might be asking you for us, using our money for a month to 6 weeks, and then getting reimbursed from Commerce versus trying to fund a more complicated transaction. So that's what I know on that one.
Okay, I have a question regarding, are we doing anything towards developing a relief fund program so that we can, the moratoriums of any action against utility bills, rent, everything else is coming to a close here shortly. And I think we have an opportunity to develop something that can benefit both our residents as well as the city. Are we doing anything in that regard?
So John, you took my kind of good the order. I was going to give you an update kind of on that note. So as you said, the governor's order expires at the end of this month, September, which means for the utility accounts, we start shutoffs sometime in October for those past due accounts. Right now, the account's about 200 plus, which isn't too far out of the ordinary from when we are going back 2 years ago prior to COVID, where we would be about prior to shutoffs.
Is that 200 accounts or 200 money or what?
200 accounts? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, at this time, without any additional action, our primary response is going to be to go through our normal processes, shut off, and then once those folks come in again, of course, we're going to encourage payment arrangements, which is new. Because that's new during the COVID that the council took action on and the governor supports. So the payment arrangements is an option to get their water back on and get them starting to actually make payments on their past due accounts. So I just wanted to give you an update there, and then we can tie that into the question that you had is, are we going to start any utility grant program utilizing the ARPA funds is where I heard you going.
Right.
So we've looked into this with Charlie. So we have some documents. It's going to be more labor intensive than I originally thought it would be. And talking with Charlie, so far there's not a whole lot of cities that have started a grant ARPA program yet for that very reason, just because it's very labor intensive. But if that is a direction that the council wants us to go, we can spend more resources into developing it. I'm just down staff right now, and I know, talking with my utility clerk, that it's going to take a lot more resources. The other thing I'd like to mention, because you guys are well aware of it, that anytime that Nick comes in and says, hey, we're really busy issuing a lot of building permits, every time we bring in a new building, a new house, that's a new account. So our utility accounts are growing. The pressure on our utility clerks is growing, while the pressure on the building department is also growing. So while Nick's feeling those pressures, so are we on the finance side, establishing accounts, managing accounts, selling properties, new properties. So that's putting pressure on our utility staff. And so we've had these conversations internally. The concern is, okay, who's going to manage it? How are we going to do this? Because we're already feeling overburdened with all the new development coming in. And now we're getting to the point of, well, no, we got to start really thinking about, in the future, what our utility, how many utility clerks we might actually need to have on staff now, if these kind of numbers continue to trickle in, because you're just moving towards that direction. It's about volume at this point and managing all those accounts. So I just wanted a couple notes to share with the finance committee.
Well, I think the reason I ask is that, there's certain limitations of what you can use ARPA dollars for. And if we were able to put something together that helped with the utility, late utility bills, not only are the individuals who are late going to benefit from that kind of program, but so would the city, because we're going to get our money right up front, more or less. If we do, and it appears that we're going to be adding a lot of accounts to our utility system with all the growth that we're experiencing, maybe we should look at bringing on your additional utility clerk sooner than later. Now, I appreciate there's a bit of training involved, and you just don't bring somebody off the street and they're working at 100%, but maybe they come in off the street and start out with this kind of a potential reimbursement program while building up your bench for added utility customers as the city continues to grow, because we're growing. There's no getting around it, and we're growing pretty fast.
In Noah's defense, because we talked about this internally here, if it wasn't this early this week, it was maybe it was last week. They all blur together anymore. About just that, but getting some help in his department, and he does have an opening that is a key person, and I don't know that we could hire somebody quick enough, because this train is coming down the tracks at us at the end of the month, which is 2 weeks away. The moratoriums are lifted. You really kind of have to evaluate how much more work would a program be versus we're going to have a body of work, but I don't believe we could. I think there's some additional help is probably warranted somewhere out there, and it could be sooner versus later, but I don't know that it's going to immediately be able to help us with this challenge if that's the direction you want.
Well, I'm only looking at it from a standpoint, as you suggest, that the window is starting to open up here fairly quickly. And this isn't going to be something that's going to be ongoing for, I'm guessing, a long period of time. There'll be a rush at the beginning, but once we're able to satisfy their late bills, then the demand certainly diminishes rather quickly. But I don't have a problem with, if you guys think we need more help, let's get more help. And is there something that we could do in the short term for this utility relief program? Just, if you guys have taken a look at it, I'm not going to micromanage it. I want to make sure that we turn over every stone and look at it. Beck, you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, I just had a question because I don't know the parameters, but for some reason, I'm remembering that we can't pay employees out of ARPA money. So if we bring
what we learned was there was a de minimis amount we can use. So let's say it's 10%. So those delinquent utility counts are 200,000. It's a couple $1,000s that we could pay ourselves to do that work. It's just not a significant amount of money.
Right. So we would hire the person, understanding that's a total city expense to recover or to manage the grant program.
Yeah, I just had a crazy thought here. The governor's moratorium is being lifted. If we chose, I'm not saying we're going to chose to do a program, could we would we want to have our own moratorium on disconnects that goes 60 or 90 or through the holidays till the first of the year? It allows us to if we wanted to do a program, hire somebody, prop a program up. But maybe they're going to pay on their own and we don't need this.
Well, my only point was, and I don't think that's a bad idea, Rob, that we should at least consider the pros and cons of that, but we're going to be spending staff time in working out payment programs and making sure that people are following their payment programs and all of that versus using staff time to work up whatever paperwork needs to be done to get it covered by the ARPA dollars. I don't know if one cancels the other or if it makes any sense. If you guys have looked at it, then like I said, I don't want to micromanage it, but
we haven't dove deep into it. But go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, and so we do have a payment program that some people are taking advantage of. So we do have that in place now. We are managing it. We are running it. I guess I was offering that as, as they come in and say, hey, you shut my water off, what can they do? That's something now in our tool belt that we would offer. Prior to COVID, we didn't necessarily have a payment program. But that only gets them, that gets them committed to actually paying their bills and paying it down versus right now, they're just not paying it at all.
I'm assuming that it's going to take some level of staff time to make sure they make their payments as they've agreed to and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to, hey, we've got an alternative here, fill out this form and maybe we can get your delinquent bill covered through the ARPA dollars.
Yeah. And under the payment program, if they fail to make a payment, then they immediately void the payment contract, if you will, and then we shut off water. Now, under the COVID moratorium, we can't actually execute on that, but that's how that's the premise of the program, right? As long as you're good, current, we're good. But the second you fail to make a payment, then it's null and void and full balance comes due, and we move back into our delinquent payment process. So that's how the payment program set up. So it's a little bit. Yeah.
Again, I don't want to argue the thing, but your staff time to deal with those individuals, are they making their payments? Great. If they're not making the payment, we've got staff time involved in moving it back into the delinquent, as opposed to taking those same members of staff and saying, here, fill out this form and we maybe can get you the ARPA dollars to pay your delinquent, then we're done with you. We paid up and go home. And we get a benefit because we get the delinquent bill paid immediately. We get our money right up front, not have to wait for it over payments. That's all. But I don't want to beat a dead horse here. So I just want to make sure that we look at all options.
So maybe we need to look at this a little closer and report back.
I think that would be, I would appreciate it if, let's not spend a whole lot of time on it, but I think, your idea, Rob, maybe that's the way to go, is that we just continue the moratorium for a little while longer while we get staffed up, if we can do that.
Maybe you can have an update at that October 7th special finance meeting, just at the end, another good of the order update.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, and so Rob, maybe we talk about that with Charlie and say, hey, what would this look like? A city moratorium. A city moratorium. And then how long would that go? Does that? I guess my issue right now is the time to prop up a new program and get staff figured out. Okay, how does that work? And ensure because it's ARPA dollars now that we're following all the ARPA requirements.
Right.
Which I originally had hoped that we could have done it a little simpler, more of an affidavit, signed affidavit that yes, this is all related to COVID. But with the further development and Charlie, the program that Charlie's been talking about, it takes more work. There's more income verification. So I was kind of disappointed that we'd have to go down additional work for this program, but we can certainly look into it and kind of see what kind of additional staffing time it would take.
Sounds good.
Anything else? We'll report back on the 7th then, like Sean said. We'll dive deeper into it and say, yeah, this did make sense or it doesn't. And here's why.
Yeah.
Wasn't the moratorium over the end of September?
Yes. So what we would do, but we aren't going to shut anybody off on October 1st. There's a process we go through. We're going to notify them. They get a second notice. So it'd be about the end of October. Is that about right, Noah?
I think it's mid-October. Someone look at the calendar right now. I wonder if it's right.
I just
During
wanted
our
to
first
make sure
council
our
meeting.
timing was appropriate. with
Yeah,
what
you
we
know what we
would
can do, since we have another meeting next week, let me report back either to Rob and we can kind of talk about it next week, next Tuesday.
At the council
Maybe
meeting.
at the council, maybe in the mayor's report. So
Yeah.
I can make sure I line up the shut off deadlines. So that if the council does say, hey, we want to take some local action to moratorium, we do that before we start shutting everybody off.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, see y'all at 6:30.
I was going to say, we get an extra 4 minutes of break time in our 30 minutes between here and council.
And
There
then
you
just,
go.
I was just gonna let you know, Charlie called me. Jennifer's gonna fill in for her tonight. She had something, personal matter come up tonight. So
Okay.
Jennifer wrote the memo anyway that you guys got. So we're getting it firsthand.
Sounds good.
Okay, see you in a bit.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody. I guess we're
Bye.
adjourned.
Oh, yeah.